The first bullet shattered the kitchen window at 2:13 inches the morning. Grace Holloway was standing barefoot beside the stove, waiting for the kettle to boil, when the glass exploded inward and scattered across the floor like ice. For half a second, she did not move. The wind screamed around the lighthouse walls. Rain hammered the windows. Somewhere beyond the cliff, the Atlantic struck the rocks with enough force to shake the old tower beneath her feet. Then, a second bullet punched through the wooden cabinet 6 inches from her head. Grace dropped. The kettle screamed. She crawled behind the heavy oak table, heart slamming against her ribs, and reached for the radio clipped beneath the counter. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Blackwater Light," she whispered. "Armed intruders on the property, multiple shots fired." Only static answered. The storm had taken the Coast Guard repeater down an hour earlier. Of course it had. Grace pressed herself closer to the floor and listened. Through the thunder, she heard engines. Not one, several. Black SUVs crawled through the rain toward the lighthouse, their headlights cutting across the cliff road. For one desperate moment, relief rushed through her. Then she saw the men climbing from the vehicles. Black coats, weapons, no emergency lights, no uniforms. Grace's breath caught. Someone struck the lighthouse door downstairs. Once, twice. The third blow splintered the frame. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed the brass emergency key from the hook beside the stove, and ran for the spiral staircase. The lighthouse had been built in 1891, when keepers were expected to survive storms, fires, and weeks without outside help. Her father had taught her every hiding place, every narrow passage, every old defense the structure possessed. But he had never told her what to do when men came with rifles. Grace climbed toward the lantern room while the front door crashed open below. Boots entered the lighthouse. A man shouted over the wind, "Find the keeper." Another voice answered, "Vale wants her alive." Grace stopped halfway up the stairs. Val, the name, meant nothing to her. But the men below spoke it with the obedience of soldiers. Her hand tightened around the key. A flash of lightning filled the narrow windows, revealing her reflection in the glass, dark hair loose around her shoulders, pale face, bare feet, bleeding from the broken kitchen window. She looked terrified. She hated that. Grace forced herself upward. The lantern room waited above, its rotating lens throwing enormous blades of white light across the storm. The beam swept over the black ocean, then vanished, then returned again. She locked the iron door behind her and searched for anything she could use as a weapon. A brasse maintenance bar, a flare pistol, her father's old emergency knife. She took the flare pistol. Below her, the men reached the staircase. "Grace Holloway," one of them called. "You don't need to be afraid." The lie was almost insulting. Grace backed toward the glass wall. The lighthouse beam swept across the cliff. For one instant, it illuminated the vehicles below, and a man standing alone between them. He wore a long black coat, soaked by the rain. He was tall, motionless, and completely exposed to the storm. The armed men around him seemed to keep their distance, as if the darkness belonged to him. Grace had never seen him before, yet he looked up at the lantern room as though he knew exactly where she stood, as though he had been looking for her for years. The beam moved away. Darkness swallowed him. Gunfire erupted below, not toward the lighthouse, toward the intruders. Men shouted. Glass broke. The staircase trembled beneath running feet. Grace raised the flare pistol at the door. Silence fell suddenly. Not peaceful silence, the kind that arrived after something irreversible. A slow knock sounded against the iron door. 3 measured taps. "Grace." The voice was low, calm, and close enough to make her skin tighten. She aimed the flare pistol. "Leave." Another flash of lightning filled the lantern room. The handle turned once, but the lock held. "You're injured." "I said leave." A pause. Then the man spoke through the door. Your father taught you to keep your weight on your back foot when you're afraid. Grace went still. No one knew that. No one except her father. The stranger continued, his voice controlled despite the storm. He taught you to count the seconds between the lightning and thunder. He told you storms become less frightening when you give them numbers. Grace's fingers trembled around the flare pistol. Who are you? The answer came after the lighthouse beam completed another rotation. Roman DeLuca. She knew the name. Everyone on the East Coast knew the name, even if they pretended they did not. Roman DeLuca owned shipping companies, luxury hotels, nightclubs, warehouses, half a dozen private security firms, and enough politicians to make investigations disappear before they began. Newspapers called him a businessman. Federal agents called him untouchable. Men in bars lowered their voices when they said his name. Grace had never imagined that name would travel up the stairs of her lighthouse in the middle of a storm. She tightened her grip on the weapon. What do you want? To get you off this island before the next men arrive. Her throat went dry. The next men? The ones downstairs were only the first team. A heavy silence settled between them. Grace looked through the rain-streaked glass. 3 bodies lay near the SUVs. The black-coated men who had surrounded the lighthouse were gone or down. More headlights appeared far along the cliff road, tiny at first, then multiplying. Roman spoke again. Open the door. No. They know the storm cut your radio. How? Because they caused it. Grace stared at the lock. You expect me to trust you? No. His answer came without hesitation. I expect you to survive me. The headlights grew brighter. Roman's voice changed, almost imperceptibly. Still calm, but harder. Open the door, Grace. She hated the way he said her name. Not because it frightened her, because it sounded as though he had been holding it in his mouth for a very long time. The first vehicle reached the lower bend. Grace unlocked the door. Roman entered. He was larger up close than he had appeared below, broad-shouldered beneath the rain-darkened coat. Water ran from his black hair across the sharp planes of his face. A thin scar crossed his left eyebrow. He carried a pistol in one hand, lowered but ready. There was blood on his white shirt. Grace's eyes dropped to it. Is that yours? No. He looked at the cuts beneath her feet. His expression did not change, but something cold passed through his eyes. Shoes. I don't have time. He removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm despite the rain. Grace stiffened. Roman crouched in front of her. She stepped back. He looked up. I'm not going to hurt you. You killed the men downstairs. They came to take you. That doesn't make you safe. No, Roman said. It makes me necessary. He reached for her ankle. Grace aimed the flare pistol at his chest. Roman's gaze moved to the weapon, then returned to her face. If you fire that in here, the lantern room may catch. Then don't touch me. For the first time, something almost like interest entered his expression. Not amusement, recognition. He slowly withdrew his hand. The floor is covered in glass. I noticed. You're bleeding. I noticed that too. The approaching engines roared below. Roman rose. Then walk. He opened the iron door and positioned himself between Grace and the staircase. 5 men appeared at the bottom. Roman fired before they could raise their weapons. The narrow tower amplified the shots until Grace felt them inside her bones. 1 man fell. The others scattered. Roman turned and held out his hand. Now, Grace looked at his open palm. Large, steady, streaked with rain and someone else's blood. She should not have trusted it. She placed her hand in his anyway. Roman's fingers closed around hers. The contact was brief, practical, and far more unsettling than the gunfire. He led her through a maintenance hatch and onto the outer gallery. The storm hit Grace so violently that she nearly lost her footing. Roman caught her around the waist. His arm locked against her body, firm enough to hold her, but not to crush her. For one suspended second, she was pressed against his chest, while rain struck both their faces. His eyes were darker than the ocean below. "Do not let go of me," he said. Grace looked at the armed men spilling from the vehicles beneath them. "I wasn't planning to." Roman guided her along the narrow gallery to an emergency ladder hidden behind the lighthouse wall. A helicopter rose from the darkness beyond the cliff. Its searchlight swept across them. Grace's heart stopped. Roman pulled her against the stone and shielded her with his body. Bullets struck the railing. Metal screamed. The lighthouse beam turned through the rain and illuminated Roman's face inches from hers. He did not flinch. His hand moved to the back of Grace's head, protecting her against the wall. She could feel his breath near her temple. "Roman," she whispered. His gaze locked on hers. It was the first time she had used his name. Something dangerous shifted inside his expression. Then, the helicopter came around again. Roman fired at the searchlight. Darkness exploded across the cliff. "Move." They descended the ladder as the storm swallowed the lighthouse behind them. Grace did not know who wanted her. She did not know why the most feared man on the East Coast knew the private things her father had once told her. She knew only one thing. Roman DeLuca had come through a hurricane to save her, and somewhere beneath his impossible calm, he was more afraid of losing her than she was of him. 3 hours later, Grace woke beneath a wool blanket in the back seat of a moving armored SUV. The storm had weakened to hard rain. Gray morning pressed against the windows. Roman sat across from her, one forearm resting on his knee. He had changed into a black shirt, but the blood remained beneath his fingernails. Grace pushed herself upright. Her feet had been cleaned and bandaged. She stared at the white dressings. "Who did that?" "I did." She looked at him. "You? You were unconscious. That doesn't answer whether you should have touched me." Roman's jaw tightened. "You were losing blood from cuts. You could have gotten an infection." "So the most feared man in New England carries antiseptic?" "I carry many things." His tone ended the subject. Grace glanced toward the front of the SUV. 2 men sat behind the reinforced partition. Both wore dark suits and earpieces. Outside, the coastline passed in fragments. Wet pine forests, shuttered cottages, gray ocean. "Where are we going?" "A safe house." "Take me to the police." No, that was not a request. It was also not a possibility. Grace pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You cannot kidnap me and call it protection." Roman watched her without blinking. "If I were kidnapping you, you would know." "That is not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be." Grace looked toward the door handle. Roman followed her gaze. "The doors are locked. You really know how to make a woman feel safe." His face remained unreadable, yet something shifted in the corner of his mouth, so slight she might have imagined it. Grace hated that she noticed. She studied him instead. Roman DeLuca looked like the kind of man people described after he had already left the room. Controlled, precise, expensive without trying. He wore no tie, no visible jewelry, except a black watch. His movements were economical, as though he had long ago decided unnecessary gestures were a form of weakness. But his eyes told a different story. They never stopped assessing her, not with desire, not yet, with vigilance, as though she were both a threat and something fragile he had been ordered not to break. "Who is Vale?" she asked. Roman's expression cooled. "You heard that name? The men said he wanted me alive. Sebastian Vale controls a shipping network that competes with mine." "That sounds like a business dispute." "It is not." "Then what is it?" "A war that your father delayed for 15 years. Grace stared at him. "My father repaired navigation systems. Your father was many things." No, he was a lighthouse keeper. Roman leaned back. William Holloway worked for U.S. Customs before he came to Blackwater. Grace's pulse changed. My father hated government officers. He was an investigator. You're lying. He spent 7 years tracing money through 5 criminal families, mine included. The SUV seemed to narrow around her. Grace remembered her father at the kitchen table, repairing radio parts beneath the yellow lamp. His rough hands, his patient voice, the way he sometimes stared toward the sea for hours without speaking. You expect me to believe he was some kind of secret agent? He was not an agent when you knew him. He was hiding. From you? From everyone. Roman's gaze moved toward the rain-streaked window. He discovered that the families were using humanitarian shipping routes to move weapons, money, and people through the northeast ports. He built a ledger. Names, payments, routes, politicians, judges, law enforcement. Grace shook her head. My father would have told me. He wanted you outside it. Then why are armed men trying to take me? Because when he died, the ledger disappeared. Grace's stomach tightened. And they think I have it. They know you have something. I don't. Roman's eyes returned to her. You inherited the lighthouse. That is not evidence. It was the only property he refused to sell, even when Vale offered him $20 million. Grace went silent. She remembered the offers. Her father had thrown every envelope into the stove unopened. At the time, she had believed he was stubborn. She had inherited that from him. What did you buy? She asked. Roman did not answer immediately. The lighthouse? The entire northern section of Blackwater Point. Grace felt something cold enter her chest. You bought my land? I bought every parcel surrounding it. Why? To control access. You bought the road? Yes. The harbor? Yes. The cottages? Yes. How many people did you force out? None. They accepted offers, because you probably threatened them. I paid 4 times market value. That does not make it less monstrous. Roman's gaze sharpened. It made them alive. Grace pushed the blanket away and sat forward despite the pain in her feet. You cannot buy everything around a woman and pretend you are not controlling her. I bought distance between you and the people trying to kill you. You did not ask me. I did not have time. You had enough time to know things my father told me as a child. The SUV went quiet. Grace saw the first crack in his composure, not fear, memory. How did you know him? She asked. Roman's eyes lowered for a fraction of a second. He saved my life. When? 16 years ago. Grace waited. Roman did not continue. She leaned closer. That is not enough. It is all you need right now. No. You walked into my home with a gun. Men died in my stairwell. You wrapped me in your coat and dragged me into a vehicle, and now you are telling me my dead father had a secret life. I need more than your version of enough. The men in the front seats stayed rigid, pretending not to hear. Roman studied her. Most people likely lowered their eyes when he looked at them that way. Grace did not. At last, he spoke. I was 19. My father had been assassinated. Vale's men found me before my own people did. They put 2 bullets in my shoulder and left me in the water near Blackwater. Grace's anger faltered. Your father found you? He pulled me onto the rocks, hid me in the old generator room for 11 days, removed 1 bullet, stopped the bleeding from the other, lied to the men who searched the lighthouse. Grace pictured her father younger, kneeling over a wounded stranger in the same room where he had once taught her to repair fuses. He never mentioned you. He did not want you connected to me. Then why did he tell you about my fear of storms? Roman's face became still. He talked about you when the fever was bad. Grace looked away. The ocean appeared through a break in the trees, gray, endless. Why did he trust you? He didn't. Then why save you? Because he was a better man than I was. Roman said it without self-pity. That made it hurt more. Grace folded her hands together to stop them from shaking. What did you promise him? Roman's gaze settled on her bandaged feet. That if anything happened to him, I would keep you alive. And how long have you been watching me? A pause. 5 years. Grace turned back slowly. You've been watching me for 5 years? After his health declined, you had people following me? Protecting you. That is surveillance. Yes. The honesty shocked her. You know how deeply wrong that is? Yes. You read my mail? No. You entered my home? Only when necessary. Grace stared at him. When was it necessary? When your furnace cracked last winter? When the lighthouse generator failed? When someone poisoned the water tank? Her breath caught. The water tank was rust. No. You fixed those things? My men did. Without telling her, without allowing her to know the danger existed, Grace felt both violated and strangely unsteady. How many times? Roman's silence answered. She looked at his hands. Those hands had bandaged her feet. Those hands had killed men in her home. You should have told me. Your father asked me not to. He is dead. I noticed. The coldness in Roman's voice was not indifference. It was grief held so tightly it had become sharp. Grace saw it. He realized she saw it. His expression closed immediately. The SUV turned through iron gates. A mansion emerged from the fog. It stood above a rocky inlet, all dark stone and narrow windows, surrounded by wet cedar trees. It was not ostentatious. It was worse than that. It looked defensible. Men with rifles watched from balconies and stone walls. Grace's mouth tightened. You call this a safe house? Roman looked toward the mansion. I call it mine. The DeLuca house had no family photographs. That was the first thing Grace noticed. The second was the silence. Dozens of people moved through the mansion's security teams, house staff, men carrying weapons beneath their jackets, but everyone lowered their voices when Roman passed. Doors opened before he touched them. Conversations stopped. Even the air seemed to wait for his permission. Grace followed him through the entrance hall wearing borrowed shoes and a charcoal sweater that belonged to someone smaller. It clung to her curves, making her conscious of every place the fabric pulled. She had spent years learning not to apologize for the space her body occupied. The world had taught her anyway. In town, people were kind in the shallow way that required nothing from them. They called her Sweet Grace, while leaving her out of photographs. Men looked through her toward thinner women. Shopkeepers spoke slowly, as if solitude had made her simple. Her father had never treated her that way, neither did Roman. He looked at her as if she occupied too much of his attention rather than too much space. That was more dangerous. A woman in a navy suit approached. Mr. DeLuca? The Boston team is waiting. Later. Federal pressure is increasing. Later. The veiled convoy was found near Rockland. Roman stopped. How many? 7 vehicles. No survivors from the team at Blackwater. Grace's stomach tightened. Roman turned to her. Take Miss Holloway upstairs. I can take myself. The woman glanced at Roman. He said, Celeste will show you the room. I don't need a room. I need a phone. You cannot contact anyone. My friend Miriam will think I'm dead. We sent her a message from your account. Grace stepped closer. You used my phone? Roman looked down at her. We told her the storm forced you inland. You had no right. I had every necessary right. That is not how rights work. Around them, the entrance hall had become very quiet. Roman's men stared at the floor. Celeste looked as if she had stopped breathing. Grace did not care. You do not get to decide what parts of my life belong to you. Roman's gaze darkened. I decide what keeps you alive. And what happens when your decisions become the danger? For the first time since the lighthouse, Roman's calm appeared to strain. He stepped closer, not touching, never touching. His presence filled the space between them. You are standing in a house no one has breached in 20 years because men crossed a storm to drag you from your bed. I will not apologize for removing choices that end with your body in the ocean. Grace lifted her chin. And I will not thank you for turning my life into a prison. Something passed between them. Anger, recognition, a current neither wanted to name. Roman looked at Celeste. Show her the room. Then he walked away. Grace watched him disappear down the hall. Only after he was gone did the room seem able to breathe again. Celeste exhaled quietly. Most people don't speak to him like that. Most people probably like being alive. Celeste's mouth almost curved. You may find those two things are related. The bedroom overlooked the inlet. It had a fireplace, a private bath, and windows thick enough to withstand gunfire. There were no bars. The door locked from the inside. Grace tested it. Celeste noticed. You are not a prisoner. The armed guards outside suggest otherwise. They're not there to keep you in. That is what people say when they want locked doors to sound romantic. Celeste gave her a careful look. Nothing about Roman DeLuca is romantic. Grace turned toward the window. Below, Roman stood in the courtyard, speaking to three men. He had removed his coat. The wind pressed the black shirt against his back. Everyone around him listened with complete attention. Good, Grace said. Celeste followed her gaze. Very good. But that night, Grace woke to find Roman sitting outside her bedroom door, not standing guard. Sitting, his back rested against the wall. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms. A pistol lay beside him. He looked as though he had not slept. Grace opened the door wider. Roman lifted his eyes. What are you doing? Waiting. For what? The next attempt. You have 50 armed men downstairs. 43. That distinction is not comforting. Roman rose. He was so close that Grace had to tilt her head back. The corridor was dim. Rain whispered against the windows. You should sleep, he said. So should you. I don't sleep well. That sounds like a problem for a doctor. I don't like doctors. Another charming quality. His gaze moved across her face. You're afraid. I'm angry. They are not mutually exclusive. Grace crossed her arms. Did you kill everyone who came to the lighthouse? Yes. The word landed without hesitation. She expected to feel horror. She did, but beneath it lay the terrible memory of bullets shattering her kitchen window. What would they have done to me? Roman did not answer. That frightened her more than details would have. Tell me. No. You expect me to live inside this danger while keeping me ignorant. I expect you to live. Stop saying that like survival is the same as living. His jaw tightened. Grace stepped into the hallway. Roman's gaze dropped briefly to her bare feet. You should not be walking. I have been walking for 32 years. Not on fresh cuts. She ignored him. Where is my father's ledger? I don't know. Do you believe me? Roman took a long moment. Yes. Then why are you keeping me here? Because Vale believes you know more than you do. And you? I believe your father would not leave the only evidence capable of destroying 5 families somewhere no one could find. Maybe he destroyed it. Roman's face went still. He told me he wouldn't. Grace stared. When? The night before he died. The corridor seemed to tilt. You spoke to him? Yes. He died alone. No. Her voice dropped. What does that mean? Roman looked toward the rain-dark window. I was there. Grace could not breathe. The official report said her father had suffered a heart attack in the lantern room. Grace had been in Portland buying medication. She had spent years imagining him alone on the metal floor, reaching for a radio that no one answered. You were there? Roman's silence confirmed it. Why didn't you tell me? Because he asked me not to. Grace struck him. Her palm cracked against his face. Two guards appeared instantly at the far end of the hall. Roman lifted one hand. They stopped. Grace's hand burned. Roman slowly turned back toward her. A red mark formed along his cheekbone. He did not look angry. That was worse. He died, she said, voice breaking. And you let me believe he was alone. Roman's eyes held hers. He wasn't. The words struck deeper than anger. Grace hated him for giving her comfort now. What happened? His heart failed. You expect me to believe that? I brought a physician. He refused the hospital. Why? He knew Vale had people watching every road. Grace pressed a fist against her mouth. Roman continued quietly. Your father sat beside the lantern until sunrise. He made me promise the light would remain active after he was gone. Tears burned Grace's eyes. She turned away. He asked about you, Roman said. Stop. He said you would pretend you were fine. Stop. He said you would stay because leaving would feel like abandoning him. Grace faced him again. Roman's expression had changed. The coldness was gone for one unguarded second. In its place was something raw and quiet. He said I was not allowed to use his death to enter your life. Grace swallowed. So, you watched? From a distance? Yes. For 5 years? Yes. And then you bought the coast? When Vale began moving men into Maine, he looked at the mark on his face. I'm not sorry I hit you. You shouldn't be. That is not an apology. I don't apologize for keeping promises. Grace's voice trembled. Even when they hurt people? Especially then. He turned to leave. She caught his wrist. Roman stopped. The contact shocked them both. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. Grace felt the hard line of a scar crossing his pulse. Roman looked down at her hand. His breathing changed, only slightly, but she noticed. When my father died, she said. Did he suffer? Roman's eyes lifted to hers. No. Are you lying? Yes. Her fingers tightened. Roman stepped closer. He was in pain, he said. But he was not afraid. He made me open the windows so he could hear the ocean. Grace closed her eyes. A tear escaped. Roman's free hand rose. For one suspended moment, she thought he would touch her face. His fingers stopped inches from her cheek. Then he lowered them. He said the light had always belonged to you, Roman whispered. Grace opened her eyes. Roman pulled his wrist gently from her grasp and walked away. She remained in the corridor long after he disappeared. For the first time since her father's death, she could picture his final sunrise, and Roman DeLuca was in it. Grace did not sleep again. At dawn, she searched the room, not because she expected to find the ledger inside Roman's mansion, but because action was better than grief. The drawers contained clothing in her size, not approximate size, her exact size. Jeans with the inseam she usually had to order online. Sweaters soft enough not to irritate her skin. A dark green dress, still bearing a store tag. Grace stared at the wardrobe. 5 years of surveillance. The thought should have sickened her. It did. Yet someone had noticed details the rest of the world ignored. That frightened her in a different way. At 7, breakfast arrived. Grace refused it. At 8, a different tray appeared. She refused that too. At 9, Roman entered without knocking. He placed a mug of coffee on the table. Grace looked at it. Cream. No sugar. Exactly how she drank it. You know that too? Yes. Do you have a file listing every cup of coffee I've ever consumed? No. That was sarcasm. I know. Roman sat opposite her. You need to eat. I need to leave. No. I need to return to the lighthouse. No. You have a limited vocabulary. I use more words when people make sensible requests. Grace glared at him. Roman pushed the coffee closer. She did not touch it. Vale knows the lighthouse is important, he said. He will tear it apart. Then we have to reach it first. We? You think my father hid something there? I know the building better than anyone alive. Roman's eyes narrowed. No. Do you want the ledger? I want you safe. And if those goals conflict? They already do. Grace leaned back. You don't trust me. I trust you more than I trust anyone involved. That sounds almost flattering. It wasn't. You're worried I'll find the evidence and turn it over to the FBI. Roman said nothing. Grace understood. Your name is in it. Yes. The directness unsettled her. What did you do? Things you would despise. Try me. No. Because you think I'm naive? Because I know exactly what you look like when you are disappointed. Grace's pulse stumbled. How? Roman's gaze shifted to the window. You watched me. Yes. From where? Cars. Boats. Houses along the coast. You saw me with people? Yes. What people? All of them. There was something in his voice. Grace studied him. Were you jealous? Roman's face closed. No. It was the first obvious lie he had told her. She should not have felt satisfaction. She did. You bought the cottage next to Miriam's? Grace said slowly. No. Namakisma. The owner never stayed there. No. There was always a black car in the garage. Roman's silence deepened. Grace felt heat rise beneath her skin. You sat outside while I had dinner with Daniel Mercer. Roman's jaw shifted. Daniel had been the town veterinarian. Kind, handsome, and so obviously interested in Miriam that Grace had spent the entire evening pretending she did not notice. You watched me go on a date. It was not a date. Grace blinked. You were listening? I had someone nearby. That is deeply disturbing. He spent half the evening texting another woman. That other woman was Miriam. He touched your hand. He was passing salt. Roman's eyes went cold. He did not need to touch you to pass salt. Grace stared. Then, despite everything, she laughed. The sound escaped before she could stop it. Roman looked almost offended. You cannot possibly be serious. I am always serious. That may be your greatest flaw. His gaze lingered on her smile. The room changed. Not dramatically, a subtle tightening of air. Grace's laughter faded. Roman looked at her mouth 1 second too long. Then he stood. We leave for Blackwater in 20 minutes. Grace's heart jumped. You changed your mind? No. You did. What does that mean? You were going with or without permission? Yes. I prefer to choose the number of armed men accompanying you. He walked toward the door. Roman, he stopped. Why are you really doing this? His back remained to her. Your father's promise. That is not the whole answer. Roman turned his head slightly. No, he said. It isn't. Then he left. Blackwater Point looked wounded. The storm had torn branches from the coastal pines and ripped shingles from the cottages. Waves still crashed high against the cliffs. Yellow police tape fluttered near the Lighthouse Road, though no police remained. Roman's convoy approached through steady rain. 6 black SUVs, 2 motorcycles, a surveillance van. Grace looked at the vehicles surrounding her. This is subtle. Subtlety failed. Last night. Roman sat beside her wearing a charcoal suit beneath a dark coat. A pistol rested inside his jacket. He had barely spoken since leaving the mansion. Grace had changed into jeans, boots, and a heavy sweater. Celeste had braided her hair away from her face. She had objected to Roman's men entering her lighthouse. Roman had ignored the objection. Now they stood in formation around the property. Grace stepped from the SUV. The lighthouse towered above them. 3 windows were broken. Bullet marks scarred the white stone. The front door hung from one hinge. Anger hit harder than fear. This was not simply where she lived. It was every morning with her father, every storm survived, every quiet meal shared beneath the lantern, every birthday measured against the height markings carved inside the pantry door. Someone had attacked the only place that had never ignored her. Grace walked toward it. Roman caught her arm. "Wait." She looked down at his hand. He released her immediately. "One of my team's checks first. This is my home. That does not make bullets respect you. Nothing is going to explode." Roman's gaze moved to the damaged door. "You cannot know that. I know every inch of this place. You knew it before men put explosives in the generator room." Grace froze. Roman turned toward his security chief. "How much?" "Enough to bring down the lower tower." Grace's face drained. Roman stepped in front of her. "Look at me." She did not. "Grace." Her eyes lifted. His voice softened only slightly. "They did not detonate. My father's generator room, I know. They knew where to put it." "Yes. Someone told them." Roman's expression hardened. "That is what I intend to discover." An hour later, the explosives were removed. Grace entered the lighthouse with Roman beside her. The kitchen smelled of rain and gunpowder. Broken glass covered the floor. Her chipped blue mug lay shattered near the stove. She bent to pick up one of the pieces. Roman caught her wrist. "Leave it. It was my father's. It will cut you." "I'm already cut." His eyes moved toward her bandaged feet. "That is not permission to collect more wounds." Grace pulled free and picked up the fragment anyway. A small blue lighthouse had been painted across the ceramic. Roman watched her wrap it in a cloth. "You cannot save every broken thing," he said. "No," Grace replied. "But I can decide which ones matter." "Mess." "No." The word struck somewhere inside him. She saw it. Roman looked away first. They searched for 6 hours. Grace examined the walls, floors, radio cabinets, fuel storage, lantern mechanism, and the old keeper's logbooks. Roman's men used scanning equipment on the stone and ground. Nothing. By late afternoon, frustration had sharpened every conversation. Grace stood in the lantern room studying the Fresnel lens. The enormous glass apparatus rotated slowly around the lamp, casting light across the fog. Roman stood near the door. He had dismissed everyone else. "You should rest. You should stop saying that. You've been on your feet for hours." "So have you." "My feet were not cut." "Do you always monitor women's feet?" "Only yours." The answer came too easily. Grace turned. Roman seemed to realize what he had said. Silence spread between them. The lantern light crossed his face. Grace leaned against the brass railing. "What happens when you find the ledger?" "I destroy it." Her stomach tightened. "You don't even want to know what is inside." "I know enough. My father risked his life collecting it." "Your father believed evidence could change men who profit from ignoring evidence." "He believed in justice." Justice is a word powerful people use when they want violence to sound clean. "And what do you believe in?" Roman's Chaza held hers. "Consequences." The rotating light moved away. Darkness entered the room. Grace could hear the machinery beneath them. "Did you kill your father's assassins?" she asked. "Yes." "All of them?" "Yes." "Did it make you feel better?" "No." "Then why?" "So no one else would." Grace searched his face. He was not proud. He was simply certain. That was more frightening than rage. You live as if the only choices are control or chaos. They usually are. My father saved you without controlling you. He hid me behind a locked door. To protect you. Roman stepped closer. "And now you understand." "No." Grace's voice lowered. "Because he opened it when you asked." The words landed. Roman looked toward the glass. Beyond it, the Atlantic disappeared into fog. "You want a choice," he said. Yes. If I open the gate and let you leave, Vale will find you. Then give me the truth so I can choose with clear eyes. I cannot give you all of it. Then stop pretending you are different from the men who came for me. Roman turned back. The restraint in his face thinned. I killed them because they pointed weapons at you. And what will you do when I point the truth at you? A dangerous stillness filled the lantern room. Roman moved closer until only inches remained between them. Grace could smell rain on his coat and cedar soap on his skin. You think knowing my crimes will make you safer? No, it will make you afraid of me. I'm already afraid of you. His eyes darkened, but not enough. Grace's pulse beat at the base of her throat. Roman noticed. His gaze dropped there. He should have stepped back. She did not. What would be enough? She whispered. His hand rose, the same hand that had stopped inches from her face in the corridor. This time, his knuckles brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was so gentle, it felt more dangerous than violence. Roman's breath changed. Grace's entire body went still. His fingers lingered near her jaw. Then, the radio on his shoulder burst alive. Movement on the lower cliff. Roman withdrew instantly. The loss of contact felt like cold air. He lifted the radio. Number? Unknown. Thermal shows at least 12. The lantern room lights flickered, then died. The lighthouse fell dark. Roman grabbed Grace and pulled her behind the steel housing. Gunfire shattered the glass. Wind and rain exploded into the room. Grace covered her head. Roman shielded her. His body pressed over hers as bullets struck brass and stone. Stay down. What about your men? They know what to do. Another burst of gunfire ripped through the lantern. The great lens cracked. Grace heard it like a scream. No. She tried to rise. Roman forced her down. The light. Forget the light. It guides ships through the reef. There are no ships in this fog. There is a fishing vessel due from Canada. Roman stared at her. How do you know? I spoke to them before the storm damaged the radio. The lighthouse beam was dead. Beyond the glass, the ocean was invisible. Grace pushed against him. If they approach without the light, they'll hit Widow's Reef. Roman's jaw tightened. Men were climbing the tower. His security team fought below. The lantern had to be restored manually from the emergency fuel system on the outer gallery. Roman understood from her expression. No, people will die. You will die. Then come with me. Grace crawled toward the maintenance hatch. Roman caught her around the waist and pulled her back. Grace, she turned in his arms. If you lock me behind you, you are no different from Vale. His eyes flashed. That is not fair. No, it is true. The staircase door shook under gunfire. Roman looked at it, then at her. His fear appeared for one naked second, not fear of dying, fear of failing to keep her alive. Grace touched his wrist. Trust me. Roman's expression tightened, as though the request caused physical pain. The door began to splinter. At last, he nodded once. They moved. Roman opened the hatch and fired toward the gallery while Grace crawled behind him. Rain struck her face. Wind tore at her sweater. The emergency fuel valve sat beneath the outer platform. Grace reached it. A masked attacker climbed over the railing. Roman shot him. Another appeared behind Grace. She swung the brass maintenance bar into his arm. His weapon fell. Roman turned and drove him against the rail with terrifying force. The man disappeared into the storm. Grace stared. Roman grabbed her shoulders. Are you hurt? No. Did he touch you? No. No. Grace. I said no. His hands tightened. The obsession in his face was no longer hidden. She placed her palms against his chest. Roman. The light. He released her. Grace opened the emergency valve. Fuel moved through the line. The backup lamp ignited with a low roar. The cracked lens began to rotate. A narrow, imperfect beam crossed the fog. Far offshore, a ship horn sounded. Grace nearly cried with relief. Roman looked at her as if the entire ocean had ceased to matter. The gunfire below stopped. His radio came alive. Tower secure. Roman did not answer. He stood in the storm, watching Grace beneath the broken light. "You could have been killed," he said. "So could those fishermen. I don't care about them." "You should." "I don't." The honesty was brutal. Grace looked at him. "What do you care about?" Roman's face changed. Rain moved across his skin. The lighthouse beam passed over them. "You," he said. One word. Nothing else. Grace stopped breathing. Roman seemed to regret it immediately. His jaw tightened. He turned away, but Grace caught his sleeve. He looked down at her hand. "Say it again." "No." "Because it was a mistake?" "Because once is already more than I intended." She stepped closer. His body went still. 5 years, Grace whispered. "You watched me for 5 years." "Yes." "You knew what coffee I drank." "Yes." "You knew when my furnace broke." "Yes." "You knew when I went on a date." It was not a date. Despite the danger, despite the blood below and the rain pouring through shattered glass, Grace almost smiled. "Roman." His eyes lifted. "Why me?" He looked at her for so long that the answer became frightening before he spoke. "At first, because of your father." And then Roman's gaze moved across her face, as if committing it to memory. "Then you became the only part of the promise that felt like mine." The words entered deeper than she wanted. Grace's hand loosened on his sleeve. Roman stepped away. The distance felt deliberate, punishing. "We leave now," he said. "Where?" "Somewhere Vale cannot reach. There is no such place." Roman looked at the dead men near the gallery stairs. "There will be." The safe house in Vermont was hidden beneath an abandoned monastery. Roman's convoy arrived after midnight. Snow fell through the pine forest, soft and relentless, turning the world white around black vehicles. Grace had not spoken to him during the 4-hour drive. Neither had Roman. He sat beside her with blood drying at his collar from a cut near his shoulder. She had asked to examine it. He had refused. The underground residence beneath the monastery was warm, modern, and fortified behind walls 3 feet thick. Candles burned in the ruined chapel above, where Roman's men maintained the illusion of abandonment. Grace stood beneath a stone arch as security teams moved around them. "You own this too?" "No." "Whose is it?" "A priest who owes me." "That raises more questions than it answers." Roman removed his coat. His shirt had darkened with blood. Grace's expression changed. "You were shot, grazed. You said you weren't hurt." "I did not say that." "You allowed me to believe it." "That is different." "No. That is manipulation." Roman turned towards Celeste. "Fin Dr. Rayner." Grace stepped between them. "I'll do it." "No. You don't like doctors." "I don't like anyone touching me." The words fell between them. Grace remembered the lantern room, his fingers against her cheek, her palms against his chest. "Sit down," she said. Roman's men became intensely interested in other things. He stared at her. Grace pointed toward a chair. "Roman." Something in her tone shifted the balance. He sat. Grace retrieved the medical kit from Celeste and knelt beside him. "Take off the shirt." Roman's gaze lowered to her face. "Grace, you can bleed quietly or cooperate." Celeste turned away to hide a smile. Roman unbuttoned the shirt. Grace's breath caught before she could stop it. Scars crossed his chest and shoulders, gunshots, blades, a long burn mark near his ribs. His body was powerful, but not untouched. Nothing about him had come without a price. The newest wound ran across his upper shoulder, shallow but angry. Grace cleaned it. Roman did not move. She felt his attention on her the entire time. "You have too many scars," she said. "So do you." Grace looked up. "You can't see mine. I wasn't speaking about your skin." Her hand paused. Roman's face remained calm, but the words had slipped from somewhere more honest. Grace resumed cleaning the wound. "When did you become this person?" she asked. "What person?" "The one everyone fears. I was born into it." "That is not the same as choosing it." "No, choice came later. And you chose power. I chose not to be helpless." Grace secured the bandage. "Those are not the only options. They were when I was 19. She sat back on her heels. "You're not 19 anymore." Roman's eyes held hers. "No." The room narrowed. Snow tapped against the high windows. Grace became aware that she was kneeling between his knees, one hand still resting against his shoulder. Roman's hand closed around the chair arm. His restraint was visible. She should have moved. Instead, she asked, "Why don't you let people touch you?" His eyes darkened. "Because touch creates expectations." "What expectation do you think I have?" Roman's gaze dropped to her mouth. "That I will stop." Grace's pulse jumped. He lifted one hand and touched the side of her neck. Not possessive, tentative, as if asking a question he could not say aloud. Grace leaned into his palm before she could think better of it. Roman inhaled sharply. The cold mask fractured. For 1 second, she saw the lonely man beneath the feared name. Then a bell rang through the underground corridor. Security alarm. Roman's hand disappeared. He stood so fast, the chair struck the floor. "What happened?" A guard entered. "We found a transmitter inside Miss Holloway's coat." Every face turned toward Grace. Roman went still. The guard held up a small device, sealed inside plastic. It was sewn into the lining. Grace stared. "That was your coat." Roman's eyes became unreadable. "No. It came from the clothing prepared at the main house." Celeste's face drained. "I selected those clothes." "Who packed them?" Roman asked. Celeste hesitated. "Marion." Roman's expression hardened. The name meant something. "Fin here." She left the property 2 hours before the attack. Silence followed. Grace looked between them. "Who is Marion?" Roman did not answer. "Celeste did." Roman's aunt. The betrayal entered the room like another person. Roman took the transmitter. His face remained controlled, but Grace saw something collapse behind his eyes. "She knew about the lighthouse," Grace said. "Yes." She told Vale. Roman closed his fist around the device. "She told him everything." Roman DeLuca appeared on every news channel by morning. She stood outside a federal courthouse in Boston, wearing a cream coat and pearls, speaking calmly into a forest of microphones. "My nephew has abducted an innocent woman from Maine," she announced. "Grace Holloway is being held against her will by a violent criminal organization." Grace watched from the monastery library. A photograph filled the screen. Her photograph, not from social media, a surveillance image of Grace leaving the lighthouse in a raincoat. Roman entered behind her. The reporters continued. "Sources allege that DeLuca purchased property surrounding Holloway's home before her disappearance, raising questions about stalking and coercive control." Grace muted the television. Roman stood across the room. "She made me a public scandal. She made you visible. She told the truth about some of it." His gaze sharpened. "I did not abduct you. You removed me in an armored vehicle and refused to let me leave. After armed men attacked your home. That context matters to us. It may not matter to everyone watching." Roman looked toward the frozen windows. "My aunt intends to force federal action. Vale wants every road watched. Why would she betray you? She believes the family should belong to my cousin, Adrian." "Does he?" "He believes whatever his mother tells him." Grace studied Roman. This hurts you. No. Another lie. She turned off the television completely. Why do you keep pretending you feel nothing? Because feelings are leverage. Only when you hide them from people who want to use them. Roman looked at her. You would use them. Grace's chest tightened. Against you? To leave. There it was. Not anger. Fear. Roman DeLuca could face bullets without blinking. But the thought of Grace walking away stripped something from his voice. She approached slowly. You cannot keep me because you are afraid. I know. Then, what are you going to do? His eyes moved over her face. Give you a choice. Grace stopped. Roman removed a phone from his pocket and placed it on the table. The monastery has an underground road leading north. Celeste can take you to the Canadian border. I have documents prepared. Grace stared at the phone. You'll let me go? No. Her eyes lifted. Roman's expression held quiet conflict. But I will not stop you. The difference mattered. It cost him. Grace could see that. What happens to you? I end the war. You mean kill Vale? Yes. And your aunt? Yes. The calm certainty returned. Grace folded her arms. You think giving me a car makes murder honorable? No. Then don't do it. They will not stop. Find another way. There is no other way. There is always another way. Roman's eyes hardened. That is something people say when someone else is responsible for protecting them. Grace flinched. Roman regretted it instantly. He stepped closer. Grace? No. You're right. I did not mean you did. She looked at the phone again. Part of her wanted to leave, return to a life before bullets and secrets. Find a quiet place where no one knew her name. Build something ordinary. But ordinary had already been a lie. Her father had hidden an empire beneath a lighthouse. Roman had stood outside her life for 5 years. Vale would keep hunting, and leaving Roman to become the monster everyone expected would not restore anything she had lost. Grace picked up the phone. Roman's face closed. She held it out to him. No. His eyes narrowed. I'm not running. You should. Probably. You do not understand what happens next. Then explain it. You are choosing danger. I'm choosing the truth. Roman looked at the phone in her hand. Those are often the same thing. Grace placed it against his chest. His fingers closed around hers. The contact lingered. I want to return to the lighthouse, she said. No. You promised a choice. That choice did not include suicide. And the ledger is there. We searched. You searched for hidden compartments. What else would we search for? My father didn't trust locks. He trusted routines. Roman watched her. Grace thought of the lighthouse beam, the way her father had measured everything by rotations, the chipped blue mug, the old logbooks. He used the light, she said. Roman became still. What? The lens rotation. Every night, the beam crossed 5 points along the coastline. My father recorded atmospheric visibility in the keeper's log, but sometimes the numbers didn't make sense. You remember them? I remember everything written in those books. Grace moved to the library desk and took a sheet of paper. 5 families. 5 points. Shipping routes hidden as visibility readings. Roman came closer. His shoulder brushed hers. Grace felt the heat of him. If each coordinate corresponds to a location, she continued, the ledger may not be one object. Distributed evidence. Yes. Roman looked at the numbers she wrote. One location is the lighthouse. The last coordinate. What is there? Grace thought. Then she understood. The lens. The cracked lens? Not the glass. The central housing. Roman reached for his phone. Grace caught his arm. If we go back, Vale will expect it. Yes. He'll send everyone. Yes. Then why do you look pleased? Roman's gaze turned cold. Because I've been waiting for him to gather everyone in one place. Grace released him. You already had a plan. I always have a plan. Does it involve using me as bait? No. Would you tell me if it did? Roman met her eyes. Yes. Why should I believe you? He stepped closer. Because I would burn every port on this coast before I placed you in front of a weapon. Grace's breath caught. Roman seemed to hear the violence of his own promise. He lowered his voice. That is the problem. What is? You have become the point at which I stop making rational decisions. Grace looked at him. The room was silent. Outside, snow fell through the dark pine trees. Roman lifted her hand. His thumb moved once over her knuckles. You should leave before that destroys both of us. Grace's voice came softly. What if I don't want to? His composure broke. Roman pulled her toward him. The kiss was not gentle at first. It carried 5 years of distance, nights in parked cars, promises to a dying man, bullets in a lighthouse, and every moment he had stopped himself from touching her. Grace gripped his shirt. Roman's hand spread across her back, holding her close without making her feel small. His mouth softened against hers, restraint returning even inside surrender. Then he stopped. His forehead rested against hers. His breathing was rough. Grace had never imagined him capable of losing control. Now she understood why he feared it. If I start, Roman said, I do not know how to want you in moderation. Grace's fingers tightened against his shirt. I'm not asking for moderation. His eyes opened. The darkness inside them was no longer cold. It was devotion before either of them was ready to call it that. Roman kissed her again, slower, deeper, and when he finally stepped away, it looked as if the distance hurt him. We leave for Maine tonight, he said. Grace touched her swollen lips. That was a very dramatic way to approve my plan. Roman's expression almost softened. Do not mistake surrender for approval. They returned to Blackwater under false names. Roman's men traveled separately. The main convoy went south as a decoy, while Grace and Roman approached the coast aboard a small fishing vessel owned by one of her father's old friends. Fog covered the water. The lighthouse stood dark against the pre-dawn sky. Grace remained below deck until the boat reached a hidden cove beneath the cliffs. Roman climbed onto the rocks first, then turned and held out his hand. Grace looked at it, the same hand from the storm. This time, she took it without hesitation. They climbed through an old smuggler's tunnel her father had shown her as a child. Roman carried a compact rifle. Grace carried the brass key from the lighthouse. You kept that? He asked. It was in my pocket. You were unconscious for 3 hours. And you searched me? Celeste did. Grace glanced at him. You sound disappointed. Roman's face remained straight. I am choosing not to answer. The tunnel opened beneath the generator room. Above them, the lighthouse was silent. Roman touched his earpiece. No movement, Grace whispered. That means they're already here. Roman looked at her. She pointed toward the ceiling. No gulls. What? The tower always has gulls nesting on the roof. They leave when people are inside. Roman signaled his team. Shadows moved through the tunnel behind them. They climbed. The generator room had been cleaned after the explosives were removed. Grace crossed to the central power housing and opened an old panel. Inside, a narrow brass lever waited. She pulled it. Nothing happened. Roman watched the door. Grace, give me a second. You have 10. She remembered her father's routines. 3 rotations of the Len. 5 families. The last lighthouse. Grace turned the lever 3 times, then pressed it inward. A mechanism clicked inside the wall. Stone shifted. A hidden compartment opened behind the fuel gauge. Inside rested a metal cylinder, no larger than a flashlight. Roman stared at it. Grace removed the cylinder. Is this the ledger? Part of it. Gunfire erupted outside. Roman pulled Grace behind the generator. "Vale is here." "How many?" His radio answered before he could. "At least 60. East and west approach." Roman's expression turned deadly calm. "He brought the families." Grace clutched the cylinder. "He wants everyone to see you fail." "No. He wants everyone to see me choose." The generator room door exploded inward. Roman fired. 2 men fell in the smoke. He grabbed Grace's hand and led her toward the spiral stairs. They fought upward through the lighthouse. Every landing became a battlefield. Roman moved with terrifying precision, never wasting a shot, never raising his voice. His men covered exits and fell back, according to a plan Grace could not see. At the kitchen level, a bullet struck Roman's side. He stumbled once. Grace caught him. Blood spread beneath his coat. "You're hit. Keep moving." "Roman." "Grace." His hand closed around the back of her neck. His eyes held hers. "If I go down, you take the west tunnel." "No." "You take Celeste and go north." "No." "You do not stop for me." Grace's voice broke. "Do not ask me to become you." Roman stared. Footsteps thundered below. He pulled her into the pantry and shut the door. They stood in darkness, bodies pressed close, listening to men pass outside. Grace placed her hand over the wound at his side. Roman's breath caught. "You're bleeding badly." "It missed anything important." "You do not know that." "I know anatomy." "You hate doctors." "I hate being touched by doctors." His eyes held hers in the dark. Grace understood the distinction. Outside, someone shouted. The pantry door shook. Roman raised his weapon. Grace saw the height markings carved into the wood beside them. Her childhood measured in pencil. Âge 6, âge 10, age 15. At the highest mark, her father had written a tiny symbol, a lighthouse beam crossing a circle. Grace touched it. The panel moved. Another compartment opened. Inside lay an old cassette recorder. Roman looked at her. She pressed play. Her father's voice filled the pantry. "Grace, if you're hearing this, then I failed to keep the storm outside." Tears rose instantly. Roman went still. Her father continued, "The ledger is not meant for the police. It is not meant for the families. It is meant for you." Grace stared at the recorder. "You were the only person I trusted to decide whether truth should destroy men who might still choose differently." Roman's face changed. The recording continued. "Roman, if you are with her, then you broke your promise to stay away." Grace looked at him. Even now, despite blood loss, Roman almost looked guilty. Her father's voice softened. "Good. Some promises are meant to end when fear becomes an excuse." Grace's breath broke into a quiet laugh through tears. Roman lowered his eyes. "The evidence is divided among 5 lights," William said. "Together, it exposes every family. But there is another truth. Roman's father did not order the trafficking routes attributed to him. Sebastian Vale forged the records and used the DeLuca name to hide his own network." Roman's expression emptied. Grace turned toward him. "Your father was innocent." "No. Roman, no one in my family was innocent. But not of this." The tape continued. "Marion DeLuca helped Vale. She arranged her brother's murder, expecting to control Roman afterward. She underestimated the boy he would become." Roman closed his eyes. The betrayal struck deeper than Grace had imagined. His aunt had not only turned against him, she had helped murder his father. A gunshot struck the pantry lock. Roman opened his eyes. All softness vanished. Her father's final words played beneath the pounding door. "Grace, truth is a light, but light does not choose what it reveals. You must." The tape ended. The door burst open. Roman fired twice. Grace grabbed the recorder and cylinder. They ran toward the lantern room. Outside, dawn had begun to gray the fog. The tower was surrounded. Black vehicles covered the cliff road. Armed men filled the rocks and cottages. At their center stood Sebastian Vale, in a pale overcoat, untouched by rain or mud. Beside him stood Marion DeLuca. Roman saw her through the broken lantern glass. His face became unreadable. Marion lifted a loudspeaker. "Roman, bring Grace down. This does not need to end with her death." Roman stepped onto the gallery. Grace caught his arm. "You're wounded. Stay inside." "No." His eyes sharpened. "This is not a discussion." Grace stood beside him anyway. Wind tore across the balcony. Sebastian Vale looked up. He was handsome, in the polished, forgettable way of men who built cruelty behind clean hands. "Miss Holloway," he called. "Roman killed your father." Grace froze. Roman did not move. Vale smiled. "He was there the night William died." "Did he tell you why?" Grace looked at Roman. His face gave nothing away. Vale continued. "Your father intended to expose him." Roman arrived to stop the release. "That's a lie," Grace shouted. "Is it?" Vale raised a folder. "Medical photographs." William Holloway had bruising around his throat. Grace's blood turned cold. She faced Roman. "Is that true?" Roman looked at her. Rain moved across his face. "Yes." The world narrowed. "You said his heart failed." "It did." "Why were there bruises?" Roman's jaw tightened. "Because he asked me to hold him down." Grace stared. "He was in cardiac distress. He kept trying to reach the transmitter. The doctor said movement would kill him faster." "You restrained him." "Yes." "And you hid that." "Yes." Pain broke across Grace's face. Roman did not defend himself. Below, Vale's smile widened. "He manipulates truth the way he manipulates people." Grace stepped back. Roman's eyes followed her. The fear she had seen before returned. Not fear of Vale, fear of what she now believed. "Grace," he said quietly, "did my father ask you to destroy the ledger?" "No." "Did you plan to?" "Yes." "Even after hearing the tape?" Roman's silence answered. Betrayal entered her chest. "You never wanted me to choose. I wanted you alive. You wanted yourself protected." "No." "Your empire is in that evidence." "Yes." "And you would burn my father's work to save it." Roman stepped toward her. "I would burn my empire to save you." "That is not the same thing." "To me, it is." Grace shook her head. "You still don't understand. I do not want to be the excuse you use to avoid becoming better." The words struck him harder than any bullet. Below, Marion called again. "Roman, you have 30 seconds." Roman looked toward the army surrounding the lighthouse. Then, at Grace, he made a decision. Grace saw it happen. He removed his weapon and set it on the gallery floor. His men spoke urgently through the radio. Roman ignored them. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. "Giving you the choice." He took the metal cylinder from her hand. For one terrible second, she thought he would destroy it. Instead, he placed it back in her palm and closed her fingers around it. "Every name in that evidence," he said, "including mine." Grace stared. "If you release it, the DeLuca organization ends. My people go to prison. Some will die. And you?" "Yes." His voice remained calm, but his thumb moved across her knuckles. "A final touch. You would let me do that?" "No." Grace's eyes filled. Roman's face broke open with grief. "But I will not stop you." He turned toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To give Vale what he came for." "You?" "Yes." "He'll kill you." "Not immediately." Grace caught his coat. Roman turned. "You cannot protect me by dying." I can if everyone believes the evidence dies with me. It doesn't. They don't know that. Grace stared at him. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. The gesture was more intimate than a kiss. I spent 5 years outside your life because I thought distance kept you safe, he whispered. I was wrong. Then I took every choice from you because I thought control kept you safe. I was wrong again. His hand cupped her face. Let me be right once. Grace gripped his wrist. No. Roman kissed her forehead. Then he pulled away. He walked down the staircase alone. Grace stood beneath the broken lighthouse lens, clutching the evidence, while the man she loved went to surrender himself to people who would tear him apart. The realization arrived without permission. She loved him, not because he was powerful, not because he had killed for her, because at the moment when power mattered most, he had finally placed the choice in her hands. Grace looked at the recorder. Truth is a light, but light does not choose what it reveals. You must. She turned toward the control panel. The lighthouse's emergency transmitter was old, but functional. Her father had maintained it for decades. Grace inserted the cylinder into the hidden port beneath the radio. A digital screen activated. 5 encrypted channels appeared. The ledger was not only evidence, it was a broadcast system. Her father had built a dead man's switch into the lighthouse network. Grace understood. The 5 lights were not storage locations. They were transmitters. She could send the entire ledger simultaneously to federal agencies, journalists, international courts, and every family involved. But doing so would expose Roman too. Below, he reached the ground. Vale's men surrounded him. Marion approached first. She slapped him. Roman did not react. Vale smiled and raised a pistol. Grace placed her finger over the transmit button. Then she noticed a 6th channel. Private archive, DeLuca exoneration. Her father had separated Roman's inherited crimes from those he had personally committed. Roman had told the truth. He was guilty of many things. But the ledger also contained evidence that he had quietly dismantled the trafficking routes from within his own empire over the past 10 years. He had killed men, bribed officials, controlled ports, but he had also spent years destroying the network that murdered his father. He had never told her, because he did not believe good actions erased bad ones. Grace pressed transmit. The lighthouse roared to life. Every radio frequency along the coast activated. Files began transferring. Phones rang among Vale's men. Vehicles erupted with confused voices. Federal alerts spread across screens. Marion looked toward the tower. What did she do? Vale seized Roman by the collar. Stop the transmission. Roman looked up at Grace. For the first time, he smiled. Not because he had won, because she had chosen. Vale struck him. Grace grabbed the flare pistol from the emergency cabinet and stepped onto the gallery. Let him go. Vale looked up. Rain swept across the cliff. You think evidence protects you? He shouted. Evidence burns. Grace raised the flare pistol. Not after transmission. Vale's face changed. Sirens appeared along the distant road. Coast Guard helicopters emerged through the fog. Federal teams, state police, news aircraft. The public scandal Marion created had brought every camera in New England toward Blackwater. Grace had turned it into protection. Vale aimed his pistol at Roman. Roman moved first. He drove his shoulder into Vale and knocked the weapon aside. Gunfire erupted. Roman's hidden teams emerged from the tunnels and cliffs. Federal agents stormed the road. The 5 families turned on one another. The lighthouse beam swept across chaos. Grace ran down the stairs. She found Roman near the cliff edge, fighting Vale in the rain. Both men were wounded. Vale pulled a knife. Roman caught his wrist. They struggled against the railing as waves exploded below. Grace reached them. Vale saw her. He released Roman and lunged. Roman stepped between them. The knife entered his body. Grace screamed. Roman struck Vale with enough force to send him against the broken rail. Vale slipped. His hand caught the edge. For 1 second, Roman stood over him. He could have let him fall. Everyone expected him to. Vale looked up, terrified. Roman's face became the cold mask the world feared. Then, Grace touched his arm. Roman looked at her. She did not tell him what to do. She did not need to. He reached down, pulled Vale from the edge, and threw him toward the federal agents. "Take him," Roman said. Vale stared at him in disbelief. Roman turned to Grace. Blood covered his shirt. His knees failed. Grace caught him before he hit the ground. They fell together in the rain. Roman's head rested against her lap. Grace pressed both hands over the wound. "No, stay with me." His eyes struggled to focus. "You transmitted it." "Yes." "My name?" "Yes." A faint breath left him. "Good. You could go to prison." "Yes." "Stop saying yes." His hand found hers. "Grace, no. You do not get to die." After finally learning how to listen, something like a laugh moved through him. Weak and broken, Grace bent over him as helicopters thundered above. Roman's fingers touched her cheek. "I bought the coast because I thought walls would keep you safe." Tears mixed with rain on her face. "You bought the coast because you're insane." "Yes." "And controlling." "Yes." "And impossible." "Yes." Grace pressed harder against the wound. Roman winced. "You're hurting me." "Good. It means you're alive." His eyes softened. "You were never ignored." Grace's breath caught. Roman looked up at her as though nothing else existed. "Not by me." Then his eyes closed. Roman survived. Barely. The knife had missed his heart by less than an inch. Grace spent the first 12 hours outside surgery, refusing to leave the hospital corridor. The building was guarded by federal agents, DeLuca loyalists, reporters, and armed officers from 3 jurisdictions. Every television in the waiting area carried the same story. The Blackwater Files. 5 crime families exposed. 37 officials arrested. Sebastian Vale charged with trafficking, conspiracy, murder, corruption, and terrorism. Roman DeLuca taken into custody while attempting to flee through Canada. Roman DeLuca listed as both defendant and cooperating witness. Grace watched none of it. At 3 in the morning, a federal prosecutor sat beside her. "Miss Holloway." Grace looked up. The woman introduced herself as Director Evelyn Shaw. "We need your formal statement. Later, Mr. DeLuca may face charges. He almost died. That does not erase his actions." "I know." The prosecutor studied Grace. "You released evidence that may put him in prison for the rest of his life." "Yes." "And you are waiting outside his surgery." "Yes." "Why?" Grace looked toward the closed operating room doors. "Because loving someone does not mean lying about who they are." The prosecutor was silent. Grace continued, "And holding someone accountable does not mean abandoning them." At dawn, the surgeon appeared. Roman was alive. Grace entered his room hours later. He lay beneath white sheets, pale beneath the bruises, surrounded by machines. The most feared man on the East Coast looked human. She sat beside him. His eyes opened slowly. He looked at her first, then at the federal agent outside the door. "So," he said weakly, "you stayed." Grace folded her arms. "You sound surprised. You had every reason to leave." "I still do." Pain moved behind his eyes. Grace let him feel it for 3 seconds. Then she took his hand. Roman's fingers closed around hers. "You're under arrest," she said. "I noticed. The government seized most of your ports." "I know. Your aunt is talking." "She always talked too much." Grace almost smiled. "Celeste says your people are waiting for instructions. They won't receive any." "Why?" Roman looked at the ceiling. "Because the Empire is finished. You could rebuild." "No." Grace studied him. Why not? His gaze returned to hers. Because you were right. She raised an eyebrow. I would like that recorded. Roman's mouth moved faintly. I used protection as an excuse for control. Yes. I used duty as an excuse for distance. Yes. I used fear as an excuse for everything else. Grace's expression softened. Roman lifted their joined hands. His strength failed halfway. She helped him. What happens now? He asked. You testify. Yes. You tell the truth. Yes. You accept whatever comes. A long pause. Yes. Grace's thumb moved over his knuckles. And if you're free afterward? Roman looked at her. Then I ask whether you still want me near your lighthouse. You already own the road. I transferred it back to the town before surgery. Grace stared. When? In the helicopter. You were bleeding to death and handling real estate? I dislike unfinished business. She laughed, despite herself. Roman watched her with quiet hunger. Not possession. Wunder. Grace leaned closer. His hand rose weakly toward her face. This time, he did not stop before touching her. His fingers rested against her cheek. I love you, Roman said. No dramatic speech, no command, just truth. Grace felt the words move through every place that had once believed she was too much and never enough. She kissed his palm. I know. His expression tightened. That was not the response I expected. You waited 5 years. You can wait 5 more seconds. Roman stared. Grace leaned down and kissed him carefully. When she pulled back, his eyes remained closed. I love you too, she whispered. His breath released. For the first time since she had met him, Roman DeLuca looked completely unguarded. The trials lasted 18 months. Roman pleaded guilty to racketeering, illegal surveillance, obstruction, and financial crimes. In exchange for his cooperation, dismantling the trafficking networks, the government reduced the sentence. He served 3 years in a federal facility. Grace visited every month. The first visit took place behind glass. Roman picked up the phone. Grace sat opposite him, wearing a green dress. His eyes moved over her slowly. You cut your hair 2 inches. I noticed. You look terrible. I noticed that too. She smiled. Roman placed his hand against the glass. Grace matched it with hers. I sold the hotel in Manhattan, he said. You own property from prison? Not anymore. What did you do with the money? Maritime rescue stations, shelters, legal funds for families affected by Vale's network. Grace looked at him. You could have told the press. I didn't do it for the press. I know. His eyes held hers. That is why you matter. Years passed through measured visits, letters, appeals, and rebuilding. Grace returned to Blackwater. The town no longer ignored her. Reporters called, publishers offered books, documentary producers arrived with contracts. Grace declined all of them. She repaired the lighthouse instead. The broken lens could not be restored, so she commissioned a new one using money from the Holloway Maritime Trust. The cottages became housing for families of Coast Guard workers. The abandoned harbor reopened as a rescue station. Every night, Grace lit the beam, not because ships required it in the age of satellites, because some lights mattered even when technology said they were unnecessary. On the morning Roman was released, no reporters waited outside the facility. Grace had arranged that. A black sedan pulled through the gates. Roman stepped out, wearing a simple dark coat. He looked older, leaner. The scar near his side still affected the way he stood when tired, but his eyes were the same. Grace waited beside an old blue pickup truck. Roman looked at the truck. Is that safe? It has passed inspection. By whom? Daniel Mercer. Roman's expression cooled. The veterinarian. He also restores trucks. He touched your hand. 3 years in prison, and you still remember the salt. I remember everything involving you. Grace shook her head. Roman approached. For a moment, neither moved. They had touched during visits only after the first year. Briefly, under supervision. Now no glass separated them. Roman lifted his hand toward her cheek. He stopped. Grace saw the old habit, the fear of taking without permission. She stepped into him. Roman wrapped his arms around her. He held her with the force of a man who had imagined this moment every night for 3 years. Grace pressed her face against his chest. His heart beat hard beneath her ear. "You're free," she whispered. Roman's mouth touched her hair. "No." Grace leaned back. He looked toward the truck, the open road, and the gray sky beyond. "Then, I am where I chose to be." They drove north. Roman spent the first hour watching every vehicle behind them. Grace reached across and rested her hand on his knee. "You can stop looking." "No. We are not being followed." "I know." "Then why?" "Habit. You'll have to learn new ones." Roman turned his hand beneath hers and intertwined their fingers. Yes. They reached Blackwater at sunset. The lighthouse stood white against the deep blue sea. Its beam rotated through the early dark. Roman stepped from the truck and stared at it. Grace watched his face. "What?" "The last time I stood here, I believed everything I had would end. It did." He looked at her. Grace smiled. "Most of it needed to." Roman followed her inside. The kitchen window had been repaired. The chipped blue mug sat on a shelf, its pieces joined with thin lines of gold. Roman picked it up. "You repaired it. Not every broken thing needs to be hidden." His gaze moved to her. The meaning remained between them. They climbed the spiral stairs. In the lantern room, the new lens turned smoothly around the lamp. Outside, the ocean stretched toward the horizon. Grace stepped onto the gallery. Wind lifted her dark hair. Roman stood beside her. For several minutes, they said nothing. The silence was no longer dangerous. It was earned. Roman removed a small brass key from his pocket. Grace recognized it immediately. "The lighthouse emergency key. You kept that?" "You dropped it in the helicopter the night we left." "That was years ago." "Yes." "What does it open now?" Roman placed it in her palm. "Nothing." Grace looked at him. "Then why keep it?" "Because it was the first thing of yours I had without stealing." Her expression softened. Roman reached inside his coat again. This time, he removed a ring, not enormous, not theatrical, a simple band with a dark stone set between two thin lines of gold. Grace stared. Roman did not kneel. He knew her too well to turn the moment into performance. "I cannot promise a life without danger," he said. "I cannot promise I will never become controlling when I'm afraid. I cannot promise I will always know the difference between protecting you and trying to own the outcome." Grace's eyes filled. Roman continued, "But I can promise to listen when you tell me I am wrong. I can promise never to make your choices for you again. And I can promise that there is no empire, no name, and no fear I will place above the truth between us." The lighthouse beam crossed his face. "Grace Holloway, will you allow me to build something beside you instead of around you?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. "That is almost romantic." Roman's eyes narrowed faintly. "I had 3 years to prepare. You could have improved the ending." His composure broke into a quiet smile. Grace had seen him wounded, furious, afraid, and devoted, but his smile remained the rarest thing she had ever been given. "Yes," she said. Roman went still. Grace held out her hand. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her beneath the rotating light while the Atlantic struck the rocks below. Months later, they married at sunrise on the lighthouse gallery. No black SUVs surrounded the ceremony. No armed men stood beneath the cliffs. Celeste attended with her wife. Miriam cried before the vows began. Daniel Mercer passed the rings without touching Grace's hand, though Roman watched him anyway. Grace wore a simple ivory dress, shaped for her body rather than designed to hide it. Roman wore black. Of course he did. When the officiant asked whether anyone objected, Roman looked toward the horizon as if daring the entire ocean to answer. No one did. That evening, after the guests left, Grace found him sitting outside the lighthouse door in the rain. The way he had once sat outside her bedroom, she stood beneath the awning. "What are you doing?" Roman looked up, waiting. "For what?" "You." Grace crossed her arms. "You live here. I know. You have a key." "Yes." "Then why are you outside?" Roman's gaze moved across her face. "Because once I believed loving you meant standing between you and the world." Rain darkened his hair. Grace walked toward him. "And now?" He took her hand. "Now I know it means asking whether you want me beside you." Grace pulled him to his feet. She opened the lighthouse door. The beam turned above them, crossing the black water again and again. "Yes," she said. Roman followed her inside. Behind them, the last lighthouse burned against the dark, not as a warning, not as a prison, and not as a monument to everything they had survived. It burned as a promise. No matter how violent the storm became, there would always be a light strong enough to guide them home.